Hey everyone. So you wanted to know more about what Islam says about getting up early, especially with morning prayer.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic.
We did a deep dive into it,
We did.
and I think you'll be surprised by what we found.
Yeah, a lot of people might assume that it's just about, getting up for prayer, but it's actually a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, I think there's this whole idea about blessings being connected to rising early.
Yeah, there is.
To get started, what can you tell me about what we learned about how the Prophet Muhammad lived his life and how waking up early fit into that?
Well, the Prophet Muhammad was known for waking up early, like very early.
Right before sunrise.
Yeah, even before sunrise. And he would spend the time after Fajr, the morning prayer, in spiritual practice.
So not just getting up early, but using that time intentionally.
Exactly, yeah. And there's this really interesting narration where he's talking to his daughter, Fatima, and he encourages her to wake up early to witness, I'm paraphrasing here, to witness your Lord's provision.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it is. And it really highlights that connection between rising early and receiving blessings.
Yeah, it makes you think about what provision really means in this context.
Exactly. I think it points to this idea of like a broader understanding of blessings in Islam.
So not just material wealth, but like spiritual abundance as well.
Yeah, more holistic, like encompassing spiritual well-being and success in all areas of your life.
I like that. It's like this idea of holistic abundance.
Yeah, definitely.
Did we come across anything explaining why the morning is considered such a special time?
Yes. We found this concept called Karahat Bhakti, which is basically a period of time after sunrise that's considered disliked.
Okay, disliked time. Why is it disliked?
So the reason it's disliked is because it's believed that during this time, negative energies are more prevalent, so it's not an ideal time for like worldly activities.
Okay.
But, and this is really interesting, the sources say that if you use that time for prayer and reflection, you can actually earn rewards that are comparable to performing Hajj and Umrah.
Whoa, wait. Hajj and Umrah? Like the pilgrimages?
Yes.
So using this disliked time for something good makes it super powerful.
Exactly, yeah. And actually, to make it even more compelling, the reward for praying Fajr, the morning prayer, during this disliked time, is said to be 27 times greater than at other times.
27 times?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a pretty big deal.
Right. It's like this emphasis on the spiritual potency of that particular time.
Definitely. So we have this idea of disliked time, which can actually become super powerful if used for good things.
Yeah.
And we have this idea of blessings being tied to early rising.
What else did we learn about how Islam views getting up early?
We found this parable. It's about sheep and a dog.
Okay, a sheep and a dog, how does that relate to Islam and getting up early?
So it's a story about a scholar, Ibrahim bin Ethan, who was asked, why are there more sheep than dogs in the world? And his answer was that sheep receive more blessings
Okay.
because they graze during the early morning hours when divine grace is most abundant, while dogs, they're sleeping through that time. Oh, I see. So the sheep are taking advantage of that special time, and the dogs are missing out.
Exactly. And I think it's a really powerful analogy, right? It makes you think, like, are we the sheep or the dogs? Are we sleeping through the time when those blessings are most available?
Definitely something to think about.
Yeah. And I think that's a great question for us to consider, right? It really challenges us to reflect on our own priorities and how we're choosing to spend our time, especially those early morning hours.
I agree. It makes you wonder what we might be missing out on.
For sure.
Well, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dive into more of what we found about barakah, this idea of abundance and blessings in Islam, and how it ties into this whole concept of waking up early.
You know that parable we were talking about before the break?
About the sheep and the dog.
Yeah, it really got me thinking about barakah.
Okay, barakah. That's a word I've heard before, but I don't really know what it means. What is barakah?
Barakah is usually translated as blessing or abundance, but it's actually a lot more than that.
More than just having a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's not just about material things. It's like this divine grace or energy that flows through everything. It brings growth and prosperity.
And kuzis.
Yeah, exactly, to everything it touches.
So it's about more than just material wealth.
Right. It's about experiencing richness and fulfillment in all parts of your life. Your relationships, your work, your health, your connection to the divine.
That's nice. I like that.
It's about feeling whole.
So how does getting up early relate to barakah?
Well, think back to Karahat Bhakti, that time after sunrise that's considered disliked.
Right, because of the negative energies.
Yeah, but the flip side of that is that the time before sunrise and right after is believed to be when Baraka, that divine grace, is the strongest.
So it's like that time is supercharged.
Yeah, exactly.
And by waking up early, we can tap into that.
Right. It's about being awake during that time, and then, how you use that time is also very important.
Right. So it's about doing things that nurture your soul and connect you to that divine energy, whether that's praying, meditating, spending time in nature, just sitting in quiet contemplation.
Yes, exactly. And what we found in the sources suggests that engaging in those things during those early hours amplifies the baraka in your life. It allows it to flow into all the things you do.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
I'm starting to see how it all fits together. The Prophet Muhammad waking up early, this idea of disliked time that can actually be super powerful, the sheep and dog story, and now this idea of baraka, it's all connected.
Yeah, for sure. And it's important to note that this isn't just some, mystical thing that doesn't have any relevance to us today. It actually has practical implications for our lives.
Yeah, I can see that.
Think about when you get up early, don't you feel more focused, more productive?
Yeah, definitely. But I'll be honest, sometimes I hit the snooze button. Is there anything in the sources about how to actually become a morning person?
One thing they emphasized was shifting your mindset. Instead of thinking of waking up early as a chore, try to see it as self-care, like a gift you give yourself to start the day right.
That's a really cool way to look at it.
It is, right.
Instead of dreading that alarm, I can think of it as a chance to connect to that baraka and start the day positively.
Exactly. And even little adjustments to your routine can make a big difference.
Like what?
What if you started by getting up just 15 minutes earlier than you normally do?
That seems a lot easier than trying to become, a morning person overnight.
Right. The key is to do it consistently. Once you start experiencing those benefits, that feeling of clarity, that focus, even increased baraka, it becomes easier to stick with it.
So we talked about the spiritual benefits, but did the sources say anything about the practical advantages of getting up early?
They did. They talk about using that time to plan your day, to think about your goals, to do things that bring you closer to what you want to achieve.
Makes sense. You have that time when you're not distracted to really focus.
Exactly. It's about being intentional with your time and making choices that align with your values, and using those early hours to create a life that's, fulfilling and abundant.
I like that. This is so interesting. We've talked about so much from how the Prophet Muhammad lived to baraka. But before we wrap up, there was one more thing that really stood out to me from what we learned.
Oh, you're talking about how the early morning is a time for seeking knowledge.
Yes. Let's get into that. Okay, so we've been talking about this idea of baraka and connecting with something bigger than ourselves. But what says about early mornings being good for learning new things?
It's pretty interesting, right?
Yeah.
What we found in the sources definitely emphasize that seeking knowledge is super important early in the morning from an Islamic perspective, but it also just makes sense in general. Like, your mind is usually sharper after you've had a good night's sleep. The world's quiet, you can think clearly.
Yeah, totally. I find it so much easier to focus when I'm studying or reading early in the morning. It's like my brain is actually working.
Yeah.
But from an Islamic perspective, why is it so important?
Well, in Islam, seeking knowledge is considered a really good thing.
Okay.
And it's believed that the people who seek knowledge are, guided by divine light.
Interesting.
And the sources we looked at suggested that the early morning is especially good for learning because it's a peaceful, still time.
So it's not just about trying to learn as much as you can, but really understanding what you're learning.
Exactly. It's about the meaning and wisdom behind the knowledge. And in Islam, that connection to knowledge is seen as a way to be closer to God.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. So for our listener, what's the takeaway here? How can they apply this to their own life, even if they're not religious?
I think the main takeaway is that no matter what you believe, you should try to make time to learn something new in the early hours of the day. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, reading a book, listening to a podcast, just thinking about your own experiences. Those quiet moments in the morning can really help you grow and connect with something bigger than yourself.
It's like we're tapping into that baraka we talked about earlier. But this time, it's for our mind and soul.
Exactly. It's about following your curiosity and finding knowledge that makes your life better.
I love that. So to wrap things up for our listener, if you're feeling stuck or just curious to learn something new, try setting aside some time in the morning to explore and reflect. You might be surprised by what you find. Until next time, keep diving deep.